What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Crossover U College Hoops Talk podcast, which you can find, as always, right here on the Crossover channel. My name is Kanaye, and I'm joined with Josh. And today, we're going to be giving you guys a top 10 list of our off-season winners in college basketball this off-season cycle. We're going to throw out an honorable mention, and then we're going to go from bottom to top, bottom being 10th off-season winner, and then the number one obviously being who we felt had the best off-season this cycle in college basketball. And pretty much we're just going to break down what teams were able to keep, what they added. We're not really going to take into account the freshmen they're bringing in, just considering that a lot of teams and programs already knew what freshmen they were bringing in before the end of the season. Of course, there's always a late freshman add here and there, but really there's not any to be noted in this top 10 list of teams that we have. So we're going to talk pretty much about how we feel regarding who won the offseason this year. But before we get into that, if you like this podcast or anything else you see on this channel, please engage with our videos in any way you can, whether it's liking, subscribing to our channel, or just telling other people about it. It really does help with influencing YouTube's algorithm, getting these videos out to a larger audience. So let's get right into it. For our honorable mention, we did have the Michigan Wolverines. I know a lot of people are a lot higher on Michigan than me and Josh, but I just feel like outside of Yaxel, some of the other moves weren't too crazy. I know Eli Cadeau is being brought in, but he definitely is a guy who needs to make a leap. Same thing goes to Merez and Ademara. But overall, it's hard to ignore bringing in a guy the caliber of a Yaxel Lendenborg.
No, you're definitely right. Yaxel is obviously the biggest reason why you're bringing in a potential Player of the Year candidate, almost immediately changing the program right then and there. But the questions really start to amount from there. Eli Cadeau is not a finished product. He never was in North Carolina. And while Michigan might be the changing point of his career, there's so much uncertainty with that. Merez Johnson, Ademara follow those similar paths. And then the returning players don't really offer that much more. Roddy Gale and Amari Burnett can be starters, but they weren't exactly the type of players you'd expect to start on a team like Michigan, and might leave some opening ground. This can still be a really good team and will likely be a top 3 team in the Big Ten, but this is not as convincing as some other teams in this list. They do deserve an honorable mention because of getting Yaks, but otherwise, me and Kanaye are not too convinced with what Dusty May brought in this year.
Right. I think you pretty much hit on all the points regarding Michigan there. And now to get to our actual list, the 10th offseason winner we have this year is San Diego State. Got to show some love to the mid-majors. I love a lot of the moves San Diego State has made in the portal, like landing Latrell Davis, as well as adding guys like Sean Newman Jr. from Louisiana Tech. I think what is most important, though, was what they brought back. Getting back a guy like Miles Bird and Magoon Guath is just so important to have that continuity at a program. They know the culture in San Diego. They're going to bring back a lot of experience. They know exactly what that coaching staff wants. And I think San Diego State's going to be in a poised position to compete for another Mountain West title.
Definitely. Honestly, I think there really is a strong sentiment in San Diego this year. This team feels like a major frontrunner in what is supposed to be a far weaker Mountain West in the past 2 years. And I think this team can be very deep beyond Miles Bird, beyond Magoon, beyond Latrell, and Sean Newman. I think the big X factor here is Farrell Compton. He was a freshman last year, worked super well in the system. And honestly, this guy should be on watch. You heard it here first from the Crossover Show. I could totally see this guy being Mountain West Player of the Year next year, if anything else. He looks really good. This team looks really good. I trust in San Diego State. The coaching's always been decent. And I think they're a very under-the-radar offseason winner. And I think it's definitely fair to give them this number 10 spot.
Definitely. And yeah, like Josh said, you heard it here first. Once San Diego State has a really good season and potential Mountain West Player of the Year incoming. But our 8th offseason winner is Kevin Young's squad out in Provo, that being the BYU Cougars. I think what really was the headline of their offseason was bringing back guys like Richie Saunders and Kay Bakita. Of course, you bring in Rob Wright and Kennard Davis Jr. Both those guys are going to play really important roles on this team. Rob Wright will be the starting point guard. Kennard Davis will probably start the 4. play a lot of those glue guy minutes, do a lot of the little things that maybe some of the other guys on the roster won't. But again, I think bringing back your leading scorer in Richie Saunders, who was absolutely stellar in Big 12 play this past year, is just something that you can't take for granted in college basketball. Just having the retention of someone who's played that well and is loyal to a program where he could have left with Mark Pope in Kentucky, stuck it out with Kevin Young, had a really good career season, and is coming back now for his senior year. And putting BYU in a position to go and head and potentially make a Final Four.
Yeah, no, you couldn't be any more right. I think BYU obviously does win a lot more with the consideration wage to Bansa, but this is not really about that, considering, like we said before, freshman, the big talking point. That said, though, building around Debansa has been the winner here, which is why we put them on this list. Keeping, obviously, Richie Saunders, Kieta, but bringing in additional support to work around the core that Debansa will be running. That's a huge deal. It's why we gave BYU a top 10 ranking in our Save the Program, which you can check out as well. There is a lot to be excited about with how well Kevin Young did this offseason, and it's very respectable to put them at the number 9 spot.
Most definitely. And for our 8th winner of the offseason, that will be the UConn Huskies. Again, with the same kind of thing with BYU, them bringing back Richie Saunders. A lot of UConn winning this offseason came down to what they were able to retain. Sometimes the best gets are the guys you already have. They were able to bring back Alex Caravan, Solo Ball, Jalen Stewart, Terrace Reed, and Jaden Ross. 5 returners from this past year's squad. On top of that, you bring in 2 transfers, well, actually 4, but 2 primetime transfers in both Silas Demery Jr., who's probably going to start at point this year, and then Malachi Smith, who was going to probably come off the bench in the lead guard spot, but definitely could have started on a few high major schools, teams. On top of that, I just think the pieces all seem to kind of fit together. You can definitely see the framework for how Dan Hurley wants this roster to go this year.
Definitely. And this has been a really good bounce back offseason. We saw how UConn floundered last year. This really puts things in better perspective. And hey, call it NIL, call it loyalty, keeping Solo Ball, keeping Caravan, keeping Reed, Stewart, and Ross. Those are huge deals. And then on top of that, bringing in a deep portal class with freshmen that, once again, they can be building around with, I think gives UConn this advantage. There's a reason why they're probably not a front runner in the Big East, but they're definitely competing for that number 1 spot next year, which definitely wasn't a consistent thing last year at all. I think this is a very worthy choice at number 8.
Most definitely. And for our next squad, a team that I'm really, really excited to see at our number 7 spot, that being the NC State Wolfpack. Kind of came on late in the portal cycle, but just had a really great showing in what they were able to land. Of course, you land Darian Williams from Texas Tech, was one of the few 5-star transfers this cycle. Also bringing Trey Holloman from Michigan State, Van Allen Lubin from North Carolina. A little shade thrown there, which was pretty cool to see. Nice to stir up a little bit of controversy in the research triangle. Definitely going to be excited for those matchups in the ACC next year. You also had Terrence Arsenault from Houston, a guy who I think has a really, really big chance to break out this year. But when you just look at the transfers of what was brought over from McNeese, Quadir Copeland, Allen Breed, 2 guys to know exactly what to do in that offense. I'm really, really excited for NC State this year.
Easily agree with you on this one. This is a Will Wade masterclass. He is finally back in the Power 5, and he's making great use of it. Obviously, the Darren Williams one is big. I think there's a blow-up season for a guy like Van Allen Lubin. Correct on Terrence Arsenault. And honestly, big talk, the X factor here is Allen Breed. Allen Breed played 2 games last year at McNeese, averaged 17.5 points per game in both of those. Obviously, he's not a correct translation, but this is a guy that could be off the bench, but could average 10 a game if used well. So there really is a lot to go off of this NC State team, which kept 1 scholarship player from the previous era, and I think this is going to be a slam dunk next year if everything works out, which I have a lot of faith in this team, which is why we're putting them up here at 7.
Most definitely. Will Wade definitely has a chance to take the Wolfpack on a run this year. And getting to our 6th offseason winner, that will be St. John's. Rick Pitino completely revamped his roster this offseason. Didn't have any shooting this past year. Now he has a ton of it. Only real concern is point guard play. You don't really know how Ian Jackson's going to work in terms of him becoming a true point guard or converting to, I think that's the word I was looking for. You also bring in Dylan Darling to back him up, though, if Ian Jackson at point does not work out. But they were the number 1 ranked transfer portal class. You bring in Bryce Hopkins, you bring in Dylan Mitchell, Ian Jackson, of course. You also had Isaiah Sellers, great shooter from Stanford. I'm really excited to see St. John's in action this year. Again, I think it's just going to come down to them keeping their defensive identity and figuring out the point guard spot.
Definitely, yeah. And listen, there are a lot of questions with the St. John's team, which is why we didn't put them in the top five. But with every problem, there appears to be a pretty good solution in whatever guys they brought in. Hopkins, Sellers, Sanan, Dylan Darling, Dylan Mitchell, Tamba even. Like, this is a really, really deep portal. Keeping Zuby is a huge deal as well. He's going to
Right.
be the mainstay of this program for the next year, likely their main guy as well, and a very likely, honestly, almost favorite player of the year in the Big East. So that's a massive, massive deal. I get it, losing RJ Davis sucks. Couldn't keep that, but the portal provided everything else that Patino needed, and it's definitely a really, really solid season. So they can go back to back and win the Big East again.
Most definitely. I mean, getting a guy like Zuby back is just so important. Just considering he could be one Big East Player of the Year, two, maybe an all first team All American. Definitely a guy that you really are lucky to keep around. Our next winner is the Louisville Cardinals. Pat Kelsey's second year at Louisville. Really just an amazing job he's done. Outstanding in just being able to find guys who you think are going to fit the mold of what you want to do with your roster and two, culture you are building in your second year with the program. You bring in a guy like Ryan Cano, who's one of the best shot makers in the sport. You bring in Isaac McNeely, he's going to bring both perimeter shooting and defense. Adrian Woolley from Kennesaw State has a chance to really break out the high major level where no one's really seen him just yet. And on top of that, you bring back guys like Casey and Pryor to help out your front court. I think having that retention, just considering that, he was hurt this past year, him being able to come back healthy, I think is just so important for Louisville. And just to throw in a little bonus there, I know we talked about we're not really taking freshmen into account, but the Cal Brown Jr. is absolutely balled out in the U19 World Cup. So it looks like they're getting a true stud in their five-star freshman this year.
Easily. And I think that's once again a thing like Devanza. You're building around your five-star freshman. And they've done it so well that I honestly don't even know if Mikael Brown starts with the amount of minutes that he could be at any other program, which is not a bad thing at all because a team as deep as this can compete with Duke, can compete with NC State, can compete with a ton of other teams. Honestly, gives them a whole different type of advantage that I haven't seen in Louisville since I was a kid. And the X factors on this team are insane. You have Sananda Fru, one of the better international prospects. He looks like a guy who can come off the bench and average 5 to 10 a game. And then Ali Khalifa got his old controversy, doesn't really be named in full, but he finally got a full NCAA D1 acceptance. He could play. He played at BYU, averaged 6 a game in 23-24. He's a guy that can play so well. Don't really know how he's going to be, but I honestly expect a lot from the lower half of this bench. And the guys at the top, I like a lot. I like Casey and Pryor. Shame his season was cut short. I think a full season can really get him back on track. And Woolley and Conwell showed up at their schools last year and can be major contributors. Honestly, first team All ACC guys right then and there.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
we're big on Louisville, and I really don't see a reason why not to be.
Most definitely. And let me tell you, our next team is Kentucky at number 4. I cannot wait for that in-state game. I think it's going to be a lot different this year being in Louisville instead of Rupp the way it was this past year. I think the roster's a lot more evenly matched too. But let's get into Kentucky, the team that we talk about as having the most talented roster in country in our State of the Program episode on the Wildcats. Definitely go check that out if you haven't already. But again, they brought in so much talent in the portal. They lost a lot of guys, but were able to replenish that. Bring back Otega Owe, which was one of the most important draft deadline decisions. You get a guy like that back, Mr. Consistent, 16 points per game this past year. Bring in Jaden Quaidance, Jalen Lowe, Denzel Aberdeen, Cam Williams, Mohamed Diabate, just all guys who are able to come in and contribute right away. Of course, there's a lot of questions about how all these pieces fit together and if you can keep everyone happy if you're Mark Pope. But the talent is once again undeniable. Kind of the same scenario as St. John's where, yeah, there might be questions as to how things fit, but on paper, these players are really, really good. And I don't think that you can hold Kentucky out of the top 5 as an offseason winner, just considering how much they were able to bring in.
Easily. I mean, the biggest thing is keeping Otega away. He was looking like a draft guy, which is definitely a huge return. But honestly, this is a team of like 10 starters, in my opinion. If you include like freshmen like Jasper Johnson, Moreno, who might not even make this roster start due to just how good this portal was. Jalen Lowe is an insane player with a huge ceiling. Quaidance looks like to be a top 5 draft pick next year, so that gives a lot to it. and having really experienced guards in Aberdeen and Diabate builds this roster from the ground up. Keeping the younger guys like Colin Chandler and Shred Noah is another massive deal. I think the talent, once again, as Kanaye said, is the best in the country. The only thing keeping them out is really the questions, who starts where, who does what happens when you have too many good guys on the same team. Is it too many good cooks in the kitchen? Is that going to bring Kentucky down? I don't know if it's possible, but just that concern alone leaves them at 4. But this is just a stellar team. Probably my favorite Kentucky team of the decade right now.
Yeah, they're like you mentioned, stacked head to toe, 10 through 14. They are 1 through 14. They can all hoop. Now get into our top 3. At our third best offseason winner, I should say, that is going to be the Houston Cougars. Largely, their offseason just pretty much revolved around what the guys they were able to bring back. 3 program culture guys, and Emmanuel Sharp, Milos Uzan, Joseph Tugler, all guys who are going to be much, much bigger roles. Now that the likes of LJ Cryer and Juwan Roberts are out of eligibility and now no longer with the program, those guys have a chance to make a really, really big leap this year. And I think it's so important for Kelvin Sampson to have that retention and continuity to pair with that loaded freshman class they have been coming, filled with 5 and 4 stars. And again, they didn't really add anything worth noting in the portal. I believe their only transfer addition was Khalifa Sacco from Sam Houston, who I believe will bring a little bit of shooting to them. But outside of that, it really comes down to the guys they were able to bring back.
Definitely. Listen, we'd put them higher if we were including freshmen. I get it. They produce guys like Chris Sinak, Isaiah Harwell, and Kingston Flemings. But even without that in consideration, the returners in this offseason is insane. Uzan was kind of out the door. Didn't really know what to think about the guy. He comes back. That's a huge deal. Sharp and Tugler, that's a championship caliber 3 team. Bringing in Khalifa Sacco for additional shooting. That's using the portal well, even if you're only getting one guy. And we trust Houston. Houston proved a lot of haters wrong, including myself last year. I'm all aboard the train. I think it's definitely going to be a really good season next year. And this is probably the most experienced team that we've listed here so far. I think this is really a big deal for any squad to have any returners like a Sharp or Uzan or Tugler. Having all 3, that's killer. That's
Most definitely. I mean, Kelvin Sampson has to be so thankful he was able to get those 3 guys back, most for sure. And to get into our second best offseason winner, that is Purdue. Of course, I think you immediately think of them being able to retain the likes of TKR, Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer. They're 3 program guys who have been there since the beginning. And of course, to get them back, I never thought it was a real possibility that any of those guys were even considering the portal. I'm sure Purdue's paying them enough money to keep them where they are, staying put in West Lafayette. But I think, of course, you immediately turn to what they were able to do in the portal, bringing in a guy like Oscar Clough to come in and start at center, 17 and almost 17 and a half points per game this past year, I believe, at South Dakota State. You also bring in a guy like Liam Murphy to add in some depth at the wing guard spot. He's a good shooter out of North Florida. And then late freshman ad, which I know we kind of didn't really talk too much about considering freshmen to mix, but it was an offseason freshman ad. That is Omer Meyer, who has absolutely looked just incredible in the U19 World Cup. He looks like a player who could play a huge impact role right away for the Boilermakers.
Easily. And honestly, this team head to toe great with experience and talent. And honestly, there really isn't much else to say. TR, Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, probably the best big 3. And I don't even know if that's a 3 if you consider Oscar Clough. Basically, in my opinion, the college version of DeMarcus Cousins with how he plays. Big body guy. Grant Nelson with just a bigger frame as well. And Omer Meyer is the X factor here as well. He's been great in Israel. He's doing so well in the U19, as Kanaye mentioned. And coming here to college, that's probably a pretty easy conversion. I think he can have a very almost Igor Denham-like season, possibly with even better shooting. And let's not forget about Liam Murphy, another transfer from North Florida. We've seen North Florida produces pretty decent transfers. Don't know how he's going to fit in with this team, but really, really solid. And the rest of the roster stayed pretty firm. Jacobson's coming back from his medical redshirt. He's doing pretty well in U19. He was a 4-star freshman last year. CJ Cox can be a 6-man. Harris, Burgess. There's definitely a lot of depth and a good amount of youth, but also the experience of seniors like TKR, Smith, and Lawyer is massive.
Most definitely. And to get into our biggest offseason winner of this offseason, That will be the reigning national champion Florida Gators. The job Todd Golden has done to reload his roster and put them right back in a position to repeat is really just incredible. You bring in guys like Xavier Lee and Boogie Flan, where honestly, I really don't think a lot of people would have expected either of those guys to end up at Florida at the immediate start of the transfer portal cycle this year. Of course, they end up both those guys, which is huge, who both were big-time stars at their previous schools. A.J. Brown, you bring in, who's probably going to play bench role, had a really solid career at Ohio. You also bring back the likes of Alex Condon, Tommy Howe, who both could have been first-round picks this past year if they kept their names in the draft. You also bring back Ruben Chinelu to help anchor your front court. And you also have Urban Clavsar coming back as well to bring continued shooting off the bench.
Definitely. I think there's so much to love about how Florida has rebuilt this roster from head to toe. And keep in mind, they weren't expected to bring back these guys. Condon and Howe felt pretty far gone. There were talks about Chinelu, Xavier Lee, and Boogie Flan. Well, first off, Boogie Flan was in the draft and in the portal for such a long time. He leaves the draft immediately 2 days later, lands in Florida. Xavier Lee had a lot of questions. I thought he was going to St. John's. I didn't feel like an SC was going to be the move he was going to go for. He fits in there so well, bringing the depth of guys like Mika Hamilton, Urban Clavsar. There's a lot more going on in the background that Golden's been creating. And this team went right back into the top spot. They immediately went back into a team that can win it all again next year. You don't see that from a lot of teams. I think obviously UConn's the only real comparison. And even then, I think UConn had a whole different schematic to get everything back. But Florida pulled a rabbit out of a hat. And they deserve the number one option in the offseason top 10 that we're going to give to them.
Most definitely. I mean, you're not supposed to be able to win a national championship and be in position to potentially win another one the next year. And that's exactly the situation Florida has found themselves in. So you got to give all the credit in the world to Todd Golden's staff for identifying guys to pluck out of the portal and bring into their program. But that's going to take care of everything we have for our top 10 offseason winners this year in college basketball, or offseason, I should say. As always, it really does go a long way if you can engage with our content any way you can. And until next episode, see you all next time.